Hello, my name is Ian Scott, and I'm the managing attorney at Scott Legal. So, thank you very much for joining us today. A few things before we get started. We are going to go over a number of different things with respect to visa options for investors and entrepreneurs. So, a few things we're going to send to you after the webinar. We're going to send you this PowerPoint presentation, and we're also going to send you a link to where you can sign up for future webinars. We're going to send that to you. And we're going to send also the link to the actual video recording, and that's going to be on our YouTube channel. And we hope that you sign up for or subscribe to our YouTube channel because we do a number of informative videos regularly. So you can get the notification if you do that. If you do have questions during the presentation, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box or the chat box. We will get to all questions and happy to walk through any of your questions and concerns. So let's start with the very first investor visa. And this one is near and dear to certainly my heart because the firm was founded on an E2 visa 13 years ago. And what an E2 visa is, it's a visa that is available for people that have nationalities from certain countries. And what that means is that they have a passport from that country, and there are about 80 countries on the list, and they're all over the globe. Australia is an E2 visa country. There are a number of E2 visa countries in Africa, a number in Europe, Germany, United Kingdom. Canada is an E2 country, a number of E2 countries in Asia as well. So really a large number of countries to choose from. And as I said, you need a passport to be able to be eligible. So once you have that passport, then if you are looking to start a business in the United States, or you are looking to buy a business in the United States, then an E2 visa might be an option. And the key features of an E2 visa are that you have made an investment, and the investment must be substantial. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but you've made an investment. The funds have to be at risk, which means that you've actually spent the money. You can't just put money in a bank account and then apply for an E2 visa. That doesn't work. You do have to have commitments or have the money spent in order for it to count. You do have to show the government where the money came from. The money can come from a gift, it can come from loans, it can come from sale of property, it can come from a friend, a relative. So a lot of different options here. As I said, we're going to talk about what substantial means in the next slide. Certain things that the interesting thing with an E2 visa is that you do have to actually spend the money before you get the visa, but that might be spending it on things like inventory, equipment, different things like that, marketing, all of those things are going to count. And then if you're purchasing a business, what you could do instead of giving the seller the money, you could open up an escrow account and place the money in escrow. And then once the E2 visa has been approved, as long as that's a sole condition, once the visa has been approved, then the money would transfer into, then the money would actually transfer. So the other thing to keep in mind is that the business cannot be marginal. What that means, what that's getting at really, is that the business can't be a business that is one where you are a business. It can't be a business. It's one where you are actually not having employees. So marginality really does refer to the employee number when it comes to an E2 visa. So that's really what they're going to be looking at, is whether or not you do actually have employees. Generally speaking, if you're buying a company, you should have probably at least three, the equivalent of three full-time employees. If you don't, then you do run the risk of the visa actually not being approved. If you have a startup, then you don't have to have employees right away, but really what you are looking to see is that the business is in a position that it's actually going to be able to hire employees, and you want to be able to show that the business is going to be able to hire employees within a reasonable, or like what we say actually is within a relatively short period of time, so that you can show that you do meet the marginality requirement. The business has to be real and operating. So what that means is that, a lot of the people say, well, how can I get the E2 if I don't know yet how can I spend the money when I don't yet know if I get the visa? And that's a very legitimate concern, and it is an issue. But unfortunately, the visa does require that you actually spend money in order to be able to get it. But the approval rates are very high with E2 visas. So a lot of people that apply for an E2 visa actually do end up getting it. But the intent to invest isn't good enough. You have to actually have invested. So you have to, by the time you go to your application, go to your interview rather, you would have a signed commercial lease. Your website would be up. You'd have all licenses, etc. We had a client who went to a consulate, and the consular officer asked her if she was opening up a gym, and the consular officer asked her, if I went to the gym right now, what would I see? And she told the officer that they're all ready to go. They have everything set up, and all they're waiting for is for her to get the visa so that they can open the doors. The other kind of big part of the E2 visa is when we said that it has to be a national of a treaty country, but what that means is they have to own at least 50% of the E2 visa entity. And then this last requirement is an easy one. Usually that's just satisfied by indicating to the government that you plan on returning to your home country. So perfect. So the next, how much is enough? How much investment is actually enough for an E2 visa? That is a great question. Now, the E2 visa does not say a specific amount with respect to how much has to be invested, but instead says that the amount has to be substantial. So there's no set dollar amount, but what we look at here is what type of business are you setting up? And if it's a business that's, really under, say, $300,000 to get set up, you really should spend everything that is required to get the business up and running. So, the full $300,000. Sometimes if you have a consulting or service-oriented business, you can spend less, maybe $50,000, but that could be a very risky application because even though those businesses typically don't require a significant investment, the government could still want to see more of an investment before they approve the case. The next one is that in addition to depending on the type of business, where you apply sometimes can really impact what investment amount or what the investment amount should be. So there's certain consulates that really have a much higher threshold with respect to accepting the case. So some consulates that wouldn't dream of approving a case where the investment was under $100,000 or maybe even under $200,000. The other thing to look at when you're looking at the investment amount is the overall strength of your case. So for example, if you already have employees, then maybe you can go in with a lower investment amount. So that's something to keep in mind. And franchises are great for E2 visa. So are things like restaurants, any business that really shows that the person is going to be able to hire U.S. workers is one that could very well be a good E2 visa business. The E2 visa does require hiring people. So ideally, we say 3 to 4 full-time employees, equivalent of full-time employees over a 5-year period. You're going to demonstrate that if it's a startup, you're going to show contracts or letters of intent to show that you actually do have prospects. If it's a business that you're purchasing, you want to show that the business already has 3 to 4 full-time employees. We also demonstrate this requirement by showing a business plan, and the executive summary is definitely very important in the business plan, but the business plan has to have 5 years of financial projections. It has to have a personnel chart that shows who you're going to hire and when. So all of that's going to be important. So that is the E2 visa. And as I said, a very, very popular visa, for investors. And keep in mind that for each one of these topics that we're going on, we do have separate webinars that go over them in detail. So there's an E2 visa webinar, for example, that we spend almost an hour going through the E2 visa requirements. So we just touch on things here. Same thing with this national interest waiver. The next one we're going to talk about, we have a completely separate webinar on national interest waivers. So this is another area where we sometimes we see entrepreneurs and investors gravitating towards, and this is actually a green card. So this is under the EB2 category, and there's a case that looks at whether or not the person is coming to the United States to do something that has substantial merit and of national importance. So we recently had a case where we argued that the individual had 5 or 6 businesses, and we argued that the individual was coming to the United States to create jobs. And we showed the employees that were already in those businesses, they're around 60, and we showed a business plan to show that the person was going to get more employees to come. And then once we did that, we submitted the application, it was approved. So sometimes the national importance can be the economic benefit associated with the endeavor. So that's particularly important with a person that is maybe moving from an E2 to national interest waiver. That is that and or investor or entrepreneur. Sometimes you can also see this category work if there's an investor or entrepreneur that is doing a tech startup. In the tech startup, you can say that, okay, well, whatever they're doing or building is going to be of national interest. And then the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that this is under the EB2 category. So you do have to either have an advanced degree, which is a master's degree or higher, or a bachelor's plus 5 years experience, or exceptional ability. So the next area that we sometimes see people moving to when they're investors or entrepreneurs is the EB1A area. And this also is a green card. We don't see as many investors and entrepreneurs moving to this particular category, but we do see it sometimes. And what this is saying really is that the person has risen to the top of their field, and they have met at least three of the 8 criteria that are listed here. And then, so the ones that are highlighted are the ones that probably for entrepreneurs and investors are most likely to work, like maybe judging the work of others and maybe deciding which people are getting funding or which people are getting accepted to incubators. So that could qualify. There could be some original contribution that they have in the field. They could have had roles in previous organizations that were critical, and sometimes their salary or compensation can be useful as well. And for both of these petitions, both the NIW and the EB1A, it's a 2-step process that we're going to be filing an I-140 petition, and then we're going to be filing an I-485 and or doing consular processing. And you do have to look. EB1A is current for most countries, but EB2 is not. So there is a bit of a backlog. And if the category is current such that you can file the I-485 petition, then you can file the job authorization form and the travel authorization form as well. And the next area that we're going to look at is EB5. So EB5 is another area where investors and entrepreneurs will gravitate towards. And this particular area is people can either do a regional center or direct investment, but typically entrepreneurs will be direct investment where they're starting their own business and they are investing 800,000 or 1,050,000 and then creating the 10 full-time jobs that are required for this. So this is an ability. This also is a green card. So the ability for someone to come to the United States and get a green card. As I said, there's a completely separate webinar just on EB5 because it is a very complicated area. It's definitely an area that you need expertise and legal assistance with. The difference between the 800,000 and the 1,050,000 is the area that the business is in. So if the business is in a high unemployment area, so 1.5, an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, then it's going to be 800,000, or a rural area, and then all others will be 1,050,000. So, and then the thing with the jobs is that the jobs, they do have to be full-time jobs. So it's 10 full-time jobs that have to be created, and they have to be jobs for US citizens or green card holders. So something to keep in mind. And this is a 3-step process. We're going to be filing an I-526 petition. Then depending on whether the category is current, either I-485 or consular processing. And then after you've had the green card for 2 years, you're going to be filing an I-829 petition. The other interesting thing about this category is the source of funds is extremely complicated for this category. You have to show where the money came from. And that's quite an exercise. So that's something that you really have to be, it's almost like an audit. The timing, it does take about 4 to 5 years unless you are investing in a rural area. And then you do have to make sure you're looking at the country you're from and whether the category is current. If you're doing a direct investment, you can't just have the money sitting in a bank account. You have to have commitments. and or spent the money. And loans and gifts are fine for this as well. The other thing with EB5 is it doesn't work when you just want to purchase a business. That doesn't work for EB5 because the money is not going to job creation, and you don't have a particular amount that you have to own. You can even own a fraction or unit, and you can't have any guarantee. So if you're investing in a business, you can't say, oh, well, the person can refund the money or the person can get a guaranteed return and things like that. And we went over, I think, a lot of the differences between the E2 source of funds, for example, is involved in E2, but it's not quite as extensive. And then the E2 requires 50% ownership, whereas the EB5 does not. So some final thoughts on other investor visas that come up. L1A, sometimes somebody will be in their home country and then they're deciding to come to the United States and they want to transfer an executive, it could be themselves, to the United States in L1. So it's an L1 new office. It's a relatively easy visa to get approved if it's a new office, but the issue comes, I think, a little bit more in the year after that when you have to renew it because it's only issued for 1 year. It becomes more difficult. International entrepreneur rule, it's very rarely used, and we won't even talk about it. Investors and entrepreneurs often will benefit from the family-based option. They might come to the United States on an E2 and then marry a U.S. citizen. We've also had investors and entrepreneurs that have applied for the diversity lottery and won. And then the final one we're going to talk about is E1. So this is the big brother, big sister of the E2 visa, but it's based on trade. So similar requirements, but just based on trade. So there has to be substantial trade between the treaty country and the United States. This one is sometimes, if you can qualify, it would be better because you don't have to create jobs and you don't have to create an entity in the United States. So it can be quite beneficial. Well, that is all of the prepared remarks that we have for today. But if you do have any questions, I don't see any questions in the chat function, but if you do have any questions, you have a minute or so to do that. As I said, we will send you a copy of this presentation. We will send you a copy of the YouTube video, and we will also send you another link where you'll be able to download guides on each of these immigration topics. So very, very useful for you. And yes, so and also the final thing we'll send you is a link to set up a consultation. So that is it. I still don't see any questions, so we'll end there. And thank you very much for joining. Thank you.